Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I'm going to be talking about my experience at the TBMC ICT GT that happened in Sudbury, Ontario this past weekend. It counted as a major event because there was 64 players that were participating and yeah, I had a good time. It was a great event. There was not very many hiccups. There was one, the placings were messed up for round 2, but they quickly fixed it. So there really wasn't any problem. Overall, it was a great tournament. I enjoyed everything about it. And yeah, let's talk about it. So the first thing that you guys are going to notice is I have my army in front of me. And I was keeping it a secret for the longest time, but now the secret's out. I was playing Drukhari. You guys, a lot of you actually figured it out when I did that poll asking what army you think I'm going to be taking. There was actually 7 or 8 of you that said that I'd be taking Drukhari, which I think was like the third best on the list, or third highest. And I think that's because early on in 8th edition, I was saying how strong I felt Drukhari were going to be with the meta that was going to be coming in soon. And yeah, so depending on how I did at the event, maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong. But let's get into that right now. So, how did I do at the event? So there were 64 players. And this is my first GT ever, by the way. I've won like pretty much every local tournament that we have, but I've never been to a large event itself. So this was a good experience for me. I actually placed second. That's correct. I got second at the tournament. I only lost. I was undefeated. I was 5-0, and I only lost out on first place because my battle score was slightly lower than the guy that got first, who was also playing Drukhari and was also a YouTuber, by the way. We'll get into that later. But yeah, so I ended up placing second overall. I'm really happy about it. Like, after it happened, I was in the clouds, man. I was so happy. I honestly was expecting to, or I was aiming to get top 20, and by getting second place, I obviously surpassed that, and I'm so happy with myself. So yeah, with that said, that's my placing, that's my army. So let's start explaining why I picked the choices that I did. First off, as you can see, the majority of my army is Dark Eldar, and the majority of it is vehicles. I did some Venom spam with Cabalite spam, because with the new big FAQ, you're allowed to play as many dedicated transports and troops as you can fit into detachments. So that's what I did. Then I have a small battalion of Eldar right there. So the Craft World and the Cabal that I decided to go with, the Craft World was a Laytalk because -1 to hit. The Rangers are already naturally a -1, meaning if you're more than 12 inches away from the Rangers, it's -2 to hit them. And I also took a Farseer and a Warlock on Jet Bike, so I believe they're called Farseer Skyrunner and Warlock Skyrunner. I took them for psychic support because the spells Doom and Jinx are absolutely amazing, and I'll get into that later. But yeah, those spells really complement the army very well and help it run as efficient as it is. Then for my Cabal, which I only have one Cabal, it's actually a battalion and a patrol detachment in one. So the Cabal that I went with is Cabal of the Blackheart. And people were wondering, why Cabal of the Blackheart for everything? Why not just make the patrol Cabal of the Blackheart and everything else Flayed Skull for the rerolls? And my explanation is, well, these 3 guys right here, they give me rerolls. And the way I would normally play it is, on turn 1, I would put one of my Archons somewhere and then surround him with a bunch of Venoms. And all those Venoms would be getting rerolls of 1s to hit and reroll 1s to wound because of the relic Writ of the Living Muse, which I would keep putting on this guy. This lady right here, she was my Warlord, and I would hide her in the back to do the 6-ups command point farming Warlord trait. Because for some of you that don't know, your Warlord actually has to have their feet on the board in order to be able to get access to rolling for the command points. A lot of people thought that they could just be hiding in the back of a Venom or anything like that, but no, that's not the case. You have to have them down on the board in order to do it. So in every game I played, she was my first drop on the board, and people were confused why, and it's because if they start using stratagems to put guys in deep strike or infiltrate or whatever it is that they're doing, I can roll for those as long as her feet are on the ground. So I would always put her down first and then start deploying things afterwards. And then also why I went with the Cabal of the Blackheart, going back to that, again, I got my rerolls from the Archons, so I didn't necessarily care about the rerolls. The extra 3-inch movement or whatever that you get from that one Cabal I didn't necessarily need that either, because I feel like that's overkill in a way for your movement, because everything moves so fast anyways. That was my idea behind it. This army is already super maneuverable, so it doesn't necessarily need that. I already get my rerolls from the other guys, so I don't necessarily need that either. So my idea behind it, and also because I'm a defensive player, I wanted to go with Cabal the Blackheart to get a 6-up Feel No Pain on all of my vehicles. It wasn't necessarily to do with the Cabalites at all and getting them the bonus and extra turn. It was literally just for the 6-up Feel No Pain, and then of course for Agents of X stratagem, because it's really good. I went second in 4 of my 5 games. That reroll ones wasn't going to help keep my stuff alive. In all of those games, I ended up only losing maybe 1 or 2 Venoms on turn 1. That's it. And I'm perfectly fine with losing that, because these Venoms are only 75 points each. So if I lost 2, I only lost 150 points on my first turn. That's not bad. If I only lost 1, then I only lost 75 points on my first turn, which isn't bad. Also, the Cabalites, they die to a swift breeze. So you want the Venoms to live as long as possible, because as soon as a Venom drops, the Cabalites that drop out, they're going to drop immediately too. So to me, it was more important to keep the Venoms alive to keep my Cabalites alive. And so that's the logic I had behind it. I know people were saying the math is better for the other one, but at this point, kind of like when determining if a unit is good or not, sometimes math isn't the only thing you should be considering. You need to be considering certain situations you're going to be in. You're going to be considering if you go first, if you go second. On top of that, Dark Eldar is kind of fragile in a way. Like, all the vehicles, they only have a 4-up armor save. Sure, they have a 5-up invul, but they die really quickly to, like, assault cannons and auto cannons and stuff like that. I wanted just more resiliency. The army already has way more than enough DACA. So much DACA. So I felt that giving them more resiliency was the way to go. So I think that's pretty much it. Just to explain a little bit more, 7 of the 8 units of Cabalites have a blaster in them, which the blasters are amazing. I love the blasters. The 2 Razorwing jet fighters both have Dark Lances and Splinter Cannons, but to be honest, in future games, I would take off the Splinter Cannons and probably give the last unit of Cabalites a blaster, but the reason I didn't do that is because I didn't have the model. Excuse me. I didn't have the model, and because I bought these over a year ago, and I already put the Splinter Cannons on them, and I didn't feel like breaking them off and redoing it. So for those of you that didn't know, I've had part of this army for over a year, but I never used it because I didn't paint it, and because the Chaos Codex came out so quickly that I ended up playing my Chaos more often because, well, they had a Codex. So I believe that should be it for all of that. Oh yeah, also the Archon himself, he has a Agonizer and Blast Pistol, and just like the Razor Wings, I wouldn't have normally equipped him with that, but because that's how I had him built already and I didn't feel like going out and buying another Archon, that's how I used him. So I found a way to make it work. And in testing, the Blast Pistol actually helped out a lot. But in my actual games at the tournament, none of my Archons ever made it into close combat. So it was kind of, it was kind of moot and not really used. But anyways, so now let's go into a little bit of my strategy of how this army worked. So because the army's so fast, and because of the ITC rules where you can't see through bottom level of ruins, my idea was normally to try and out-deploy my opponent as best as possible by hiding all of my units behind a ruin of some sort or behind a giant rock or whatever, and getting them out of range of most of the enemy shots. This way, if my opponent does end up going first, it limits the amount of damage that they're actually going to be able to do to me. And then any damage they do try to do to me, I have the 6-up Feel No Pain in all my saves to try to stop me. So most of the time, I would only lose like 1 Venom, and in 2 of the games, I didn't lose anything on turn 1, which was amazing. Getting into the rest of the stuff. So, why did I choose to build this list the way I did? And why didn't I use Ravagers? Why didn't I use another Razorwing? Why didn't I use a big blob of Cabalites? And the reason being is because I was specifically tailoring to the ITC Champions missions. I am a firm believer that whenever you're going to an event, you don't ever just build a list without considering the event you're going to be playing in. You always tailor your list to the missions that are going to be at the event. So for this, with ITC Champions missions, there's a lot of secondaries and stuff. And some secondaries are like Get a point if you kill a unit with more than 10 wounds. Get a point if you kill a unit that has more than 10 models. Get a point for every 2 damage you do to a character. There's tons of stuff for all of that. I'll put a link in the description for the ITC Champions missions for any of you that want to start picking up the ITC and want to check it out. But yeah, so I made my list to give up barely any secondaries. So like my opponent, they could take Big Game Hunter, but they're only going to get 2 points. That's it. All of these things only have 6 wounds. So you can't get Big Hunter or Big Game Hunter for killing any of them because they don't have 10 or more wounds. All of my infantry squads only have 5 guys. So there's no way that you're going to get the Reaper, which is kill a unit of 10 guys. I do have 5 characters, which was kind of a red herring for my opponent. They would always take Headhunter, which is get a point for killing a character. But these characters are not easy to kill. The 3 Archons have a 2-up invul. Sure, they lose it when they roll a 1. But to be honest, I didn't lose a single Archon the whole tournament because nobody even had a chance to target them because there was always stuff in the middle because I spaced my army in such a way that they couldn't like use a flyer to land to shoot at one of them, or I never got charged because all the assault armies I played, they never made it anywhere near me. I just kited them and blew them away. Most people would take Headhunter against me and they wouldn't score a single point on it. If anything, they might score 1 by killing like my Warlock, and that's basically it. And that was only in 1 game, and that was because I messed up and I put them a little too far forward somewhere. But that was my mistake. It happens. Nobody's perfect. So people would normally take Headhunter against me, and they'd get like no points. Then they'd also take Death by 1,000 Cuts, which is killing 3 units in a turn. And there was only 1 player that ever actually scored that. And I believe it was the player I played in the 5th round, which had a super cheesy army that we'll get into once we get there. And then some armies that were mobile would take Recon, and the other ones that weren't mobile would take Old School. Those are literally the only 4 secondaries that were ever picked against my army. And most people usually only scored 2 or 3 points altogether for those secondaries, and that was it. So then it came down to the primaries, which this army is super good at getting the primaries. I'm usually always going to kill more than my opponent because I just have so much DACA starting from turn 1 because everything has a really decent range or movement to get into range. And then be on more objectives. This army is super mobile, so it's able to fly all over the board and grab objectives everywhere. So I could always do that. Plus, I built this list to not actually care about my opponent's list, because this list is super good at getting recon and behind enemy lines every turn. Turn 1, 2 flyers. I would always start them in the 2 corners. I'd put Venoms around them and stuff and whatever, but then, yeah, they would start in the corners. They would fly up the board just enough to be able to be getting recon and big game hunter at the same time. Then on turn 2, they would turn and go this way and still be in recon and big game hunter on turn 2. Then on turn 3, they would do it again. And then by turn 4, my Venoms were already up the board and they could replace them. So I would score pretty much maxed out recon and behind enemy lines every turn. And again, those 2 secondaries have nothing to do with my opponent. So I could always, and then on top of that, depending on their list, I'd either take the Reaper or Big Game Hunter or Titan Slayer, one of those things. But every game I took behind enemy lines and recon, because that's what the army is amazing at doing. You will max those out every time, unless your opponent has an army that can kill these on turn 1, which honestly never happened. Do you know how many times these Razor Wings died throughout the tournament? 0 times. They lived so they never died. I think one of them, oh no, I lied. In one of my matchups, one got charged by a fly rint and ended up dying. So that there was that. I almost forgot about that. But other than that one instance, neither of them died other than that. Yeah, I tailored them to the ITC GT. I didn't bring Ravagers because, again, they give up big game hunter. If I was playing in like a Games Workshop tournament or an ETC tournament, which is different than the ITC, it's like the European version of ITC, I would bring Ravagers in that instance because you don't pick secondaries based off your opponent's list there. So again, the whole idea of this list was I can max out behind enemy lines and recon no matter what, but my opponent can't necessarily max out anything unless they have a similar list that can get behind enemy lines and recon. And even if they did, this list would be really good at shooting the stuff down that gets close, because this list is absolutely amazing at picking any unit, and I repeat, any unit in the game, and I will delete it in 1 turn. And that's because of Doom and Jinx. If you guys don't know what that is, Doom is a spell that gives reroll wound rolls against that target. So like a Tesseract Vault, for example, which may come up in a game that I played, but just giving an example. Tesseract Vault, you do, well, first off, you use a stratagem. I don't know what it's called, to be honest. You give a +1 to both of your Psychers, so both of them get a +1 to cast stuff. Then your Farseer, he's going to cast Doom. And then on the Doom, if it goes off, you re-roll wound rolls. So you do it to a Tesseract Vault, you now re-roll wound rolls. Then you go over to the Warlock, and you cast Jinx. And Jinx is a -1 to their saves. That is including invulnerable saves. You can make the Tesseract Vault go from a 4-up invul to a 5-up invul, which is a pretty significant jump. And yeah, and then once you do that, you just unload with everything. So even against vehicles like a Tesseract Vault, even poison weapons are going to do some damage because you're re-rolling all your wounds. So sure, you only wound on a 6, but you get to re-roll every time. So I usually, on average, got 1 or 2 wounds every time with the Splinter weapons. And because their armor save just went from a 3-up to a 4-up, we get through more often and do more damage. In one of the matchups, spoiler, I did play against a Tesseract Vault list. And in that matchup, I was able to get a Tesseract down to like half wounds just from my Splinter shots alone. That wasn't even considering all blasters and dark lances I had. Yeah, so it was actually pretty good. So that's how the army plays. That's the strategy behind it. So now let's get into the questions of that I got from you guys on Reddit. So first, why Blackheart? I already explained that. 6-up, feel no pain, amazing. Sure, you can have reroll ones and a little bit of better movement, but to be honest, I'd rather have the 6-up feel no pain because, again, I feel like Drukhari's only weakness is that they're not the most resilient type tanks. They're not like Land Raiders or Rhinos. They're only toughness 5. Like, heavy bolters really screw these things pretty hard. Just luckily, nobody was spamming heavy bolters. Which is one thing that I want to talk about, too. This army might seem really strong, but it's just because nobody's prepared for it. Nobody built to counter it. And that's what I found at the tournament. There wasn't one list that went out of their way to counter Drukhari, and that's why Drukhari is doing so well right now. So the next question I had is, why didn't you use any witch cults or homunculus covens? And the honest reason of why I didn't do that is because I don't like the look of the models. I know that's not a competitive answer. You should always be opting to use the most optimized lists and competitive things. But I just didn't like the look of the models. I still want to have fun while I'm playing, and I want to actually enjoy my army. And the Cabalites are my favorite part of the army, so I wanted to make a Cabalite force that could win an event, and well, I got pretty close. I got second, so there we go. But yeah, that's the reason why I didn't use witch cults or covens. I know they are good. They have been topping events recently. It's just it's not my play style, or at least not my preferred play style. And yeah, that's basically it. So next question. Isn't this army a little low on anti-tank? And that's because it only has 7 blasters and 4 dark lances. So altogether, there's 11 anti-tank weapons. And my answer is yes and no. It's a little light on it, but to be honest, in a lot of matchups, like in my testing, I played against Guard a lot. I played against Marines a lot that had like Razorbacks and stuff like that. You do not need to kill tanks to make them useless. All of this stuff moves super fast, and it can charge those tanks. So I have so much anti-infantry that you would annihilate the screen on turn 1. And if not turn 1, you would annihilate it on turn 2, and then you would proceed to charge all of their tanks. Every time I played against a Guard player, they forfeited on either turn 2 or turn 3 because I would kill all of their infantry, which included 160 conscripts in one list that I played against. I killed them all in 2 turns and then charged all the tanks behind them, and it was a good game. That was it. There was nothing they could do about it. So you don't necessarily need to kill the tanks. You just need to stop them from doing stuff. Other than that, in all the matchups I had, the blasters and other things, they did their job for the most part. I blew up a lot of tanks. I blew up a lot of monsters. Poison also helped kill the monsters too. But yeah, I don't think it's low on it. Well, it's low on anti-tank, but it's not bad against tank-heavy armies because again, just go and bad touch the tanks and they ain't gonna do nothing. So that's what I would do. Mainly, that was a strategy: move up, annihilate the screen, charge all the tanks, make them useless, win game. All right, next question. Hardest matchups. I just went over that. The anything that's anti-flyer, and then anything that's like toughness 8 and can still shoot out of combat or hits back like a truck. So like I believe like Baneblades, they're pretty good too. But I played against a Baneblade list, and I actually I won the game by turn 3, and I was able to kill the Baneblade in 1 turn. So yeah, Doom and Jinx is an amazing combo. Moving on. Why no blasters on the Archons? Reason I didn't put blasters on the Archons is because they were just my reroll bots. Well, she was just my command point farm, and then these guys were just reroll bots. They'd walk out in different directions because sometimes I need to spread out my army, and they would be giving rerolls of hit rolls of 1s to all the vehicles, and this guy right here would be giving rerolls of 1 to wound for all the vehicles as well. So that's why they don't have blasters. And with the way that I play the army, I don't think I would put blasters on them. Because again, I want my opponent to pick Headhunter, but I don't want to give them a chance to actually kill these guys. So I want to keep them in the back like the whole game and just behind my stuff, giving them all rerolls. That's the way I liked it, at least. Why the Lamians? Because I have 2 converted Lamians in my list. The reason I had to convert them is because at the time, they were out of stock. So I asked a tournament organizer, is it okay if I kit bash a couple of witches with some Cabalite stuff and use them as Lamians? Because I literally can't buy any right now. And they were perfectly cool with it, so yeah. But in the future, I'm probably going to buy some real Lamians or get some green stuff and like put some, make them look like they're wearing dresses or skirts or something like that. Anyways, so the Lamians, why are they in the list? They're in the list because they're in the Venom that the Archons are in at the starting of the game. And the reason being is because the chances of rolling 1-1 on 2 dice and losing an Archon is much easier to, like, it happens more often than rolling 2 1s on 4 dice. So I would rather roll 4 dice and get 2 1s and kill my Lamians than roll 2 dice and roll 1-1 and kill an Archon. Because then again, Headhunter. I don't want to give away a point because my guy tripped getting out of the Venom. The Lamians aren't characters either, so they don't give up Headhunter. Also, you could use a Venom as like a bus, and you could let Lamians off on stops and let them sit on objectives. But again, because they're not characters, you only want to do this if you can drop them off on an objective that's hidden from line of sight, which is either by a ruin or a giant rock or something like that. But to be honest, in the tournament that I played, they were never used as that. They were literally only in the Venom to protect the Archons. That was literally their only job at the tournament. Why double splinter cannons on all the Venoms? Because I did go double splinter cannons on all the Venoms. And my reasoning is more DACA. I wanted more shots. They get more shots at a farther range than if you gave them the other ones. Sure, you could probably fit in like another Venom and stuff, but these were the models I had. I didn't want to go out and buy more because most of this army I bought right after that video that I explained. I had ordered it during that video and waited about a week for it to get in, and then had to paint all of this army within a month. And it's not the best painted, but it's alright. It's like tabletop standard, so I'm happy with that. Yeah, double cannons. These things were the MVP in 3 of the 5 games. They annihilated all 3 of my matchups pretty well because they were all like monsters and infantry. And the MVP, I love this unit, it's amazing. I would always take double splinter cannons every time. At least that's just me, because again, I like more DACA, and even with the double splinter cannons, they're only 75 points. They're cheap as crap. Which brings me to another thing that I forgot to mention earlier on. People are probably wondering, where's your screen? How do you protect yourself from deep strike and stuff? You're looking at the screen. It's the Venoms. You space them out in such a way that like I played against Blood Angels a lot in practice. You space them out in such a way that first off, when like Blood Angels or something go to use their 3d6 charge, you Agents Effect that, which is the I cancel your stratagem. And even if they make their charge, unless they super daisy chain their guy, they're only going to get in with 1 Venom. Sure, use your 300 point unit to kill my 75 point unit. Now on my turn, I'm just going to turn everything to aim at that unit and blow it off the field. It always worked. These units are so cheap that you don't need a screen for them. They are the screen. They are the screen. Also because you can't attack the guys that are inside. And then the only fear I ever had is if my opponent did it right, when I got the guys out, they could possibly surround one of the Cabalites, but I always made it as hard as possible to do that, and that never actually happened in the tournament or in practice. So yeah, even though it could happen in theory, it never actually did, so I'm happy with that. So how to counter this list? I already explained it. Toughness 8 vehicles that can actually hit back pretty hard in close combat, so you can't hold them and stuff, or they can shoot out of close combat. And anti-flyer weapons does a really good job against all this stuff. Because yeah, as you can see, pretty much everything except for the infantry have the fly keyword. And that's the main part of the force, is the Venoms and everything. Once the Venoms start dropping, like I said, the Cabalites die to a swift breeze, so they'll start dropping too. Also, another thing, I could have optimized the list a little bit better by giving these guys the reroll, making them a Cabal that allows them to reroll ones to hit, but still having Blackheart Venoms. If I could have found a way to do that, that probably would have been more optimal. But to be honest, I kind of like Blackheart Infantry too, because there were times in games where like being morale immune or even the minus to the leadership in turn 4 actually paid off. So I really like it. Yeah, I'll have to test it, but as of right now, I think Blackheart is hands down the best one. But that's just my opinion. If you disagree, you can disagree, but that's my opinion. Do you feel that the army is imbalanced? And this may be controversial to some of you, but I'm going to say no. Because, again, in games where people tailored, like in practice games, where they tailored to fight against my army, it was an uphill battle and it felt like an even game. It's just right now, nobody's prepared for Drukhari. Nobody really knows what they do, which is also one of the reasons why I brought the army, for the surprise factor of most people haven't had a chance to fully test against the army yet. So I was hoping that a lot of people just didn't necessarily know how to counter it or know how to build a list that would counter it. I don't think it's imbalanced. I don't think Agents of Vect is imbalanced. I personally only ever use it 2 times a game, and it wasn't like a game-winning thing. It did give me a good advantage, but yeah. And then there were times in practice I needed to learn how to use Agents of Vect properly, because there was times in practice where I was baited out because my opponent's like, I'm going to do this. No, you're not. I'm going to cancel it. And then they're like, oh, okay, I got my command points back. Now I'm going to do this other stratagem, which is what I really wanted to do. And then I'm like, oh, okay, crap, I wasted Agents of Vect. But yeah, so that can happen. Your opponent can outplay you that way with like some mind games. Because as much as people might not want to admit it, there is mind games in Warhammer. In every game you play, in chess, poker, football, basketball, baseball, any competition, there is always some sort of mind games in there. So yeah, I don't think it's imbalanced. I do think it's really, really strong. I just think that if people played an appropriate list, you could beat this list. Like, there's time. If they're imbalanced, then the whole top 8 would be Drukhari, 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 Drukhari. But they're not. If you go to the event posting on Best Coast Pairings and look, there's about 13 Drukhari players. Only I think 3 of them are in the top 16. So it really depends on the player playing the army as well. So it just happens to be that I think that the good players are flocking to this army because yes, it is really strong, which might make people think it's imbalanced because they're popping up in the top so much. But then again, if they're imbalanced, then the people that aren't good at the game should still be winning with them as well, but they're not. So there's obviously some sort of balance to them. And again, you can counter them if you bring the proper units in the proper list. So right now, I don't feel they're imbalanced. They are super strong, but personally, I don't feel they're imbalanced. I should have said this earlier on in the video, but a tip for tournaments, if you're there to win, I recommend do not party. As stupid as that sounds, because I know everyone wants to go out with their friends and have some drinks and have a good time, my friends were literally at the bar until like 1 in the morning while I was sleeping at the hotel. I went to bed at like 10:30 each night because I wanted to make sure that I woke up not hungover, and that I woke up with my brain working properly, because I wanted to be able to win every one of my games. So the first night we got there, I didn't drink, I didn't go party, I went to bed at like an old person at like 10 o'clock, and then day 2, again, didn't party, all my friends went out and drank. Well, again, I went back to the hotel and went to bed at a decent time, and was able to get up on the next day. Then after I ended up getting 2nd place and whatever, then I went and partied with my friends, and we had a great time. We celebrated my placing, and yeah, it was amazing. It was a good trip. I ended up placing 2nd overall, like I said earlier. And so with that said, I want to thank everyone that helped me practice, including my patrons. Yeah, everybody was amazing. If I didn't get the practice that I did, I guarantee you I wouldn't have done as well as I did. But I literally played like 30 games in the month that I had this army. It was like day of painting, then day of practice. And when I had a day of practice, I played like 2 or 3 games. And then I'd go day of painting, and then a day of practice. Then day of painting, then day of practice. And I did it that way too, so that way I didn't get super bored of the painting. But honestly, after painting this whole army after a month, I'm not touching a brush for like 2 months. That's not happening. I'll pay Ryan to paint my army at this point. And also, you didn't need the army to be painted at the tournament, but I'm a big advocate for wanting fully painted armies at the tournament. Plus, I know it would feel bad for some people coming out to the tournament, not necessarily to win, but just to have a good game of 40K. I don't want to show up with the gray tide and have that person not enjoy the game as much just because they have to look at my gray models the whole time. So I'm a big advocate for paint your army. Even if you don't want to, just suck it up, get through it, because your opponents will enjoy the game much more too by looking at an army, or looking at a painted army. So yeah, again, thanks to all my patrons. I love you guys. Thanks to all my friends and the people in my club that practice against me. You guys are amazing. Again, couldn't have done it without you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments if you want more videos like this. So with that said, thank you guys for watching. If you want, you can follow me on Facebook to keep up to date with me. Like the people on Facebook, I was constantly updating my score after each round to let you guys know where I was. So yeah, for future tournaments and stuff like that, if you want to keep up to date with me, check me out on Facebook at Almost Pro Gaming. If you want to support the channel, you can just continue watching my videos. You can hit that like button or subscribe. And if you want to support the channel even further and help me get to more events so that I can compete more often and get interviews with other players, which, by the way, after this video, I'm going to have interviews with the people that placed first and third. I'm not going to do an interview with myself because I basically already did that and answered every question that I would have anyways. So yeah, the next video I'm going to have is going to be an interview that I did with the first place player and third place player. So yeah, again, check me out on Patreon if you want to help support me and help me get out to other events. And also, if you just want to see other armies on the channel, helps me do that too. Helps me get some new armies to show how to play competitively with battle reports and stuff. But yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy wargaming.